Hey everyone. So just watched episode 2, season 3, White Lotus, and I could just stop it with the line from this episode. Let's just leave it at it's good to talk about things with a wise Indian. That was it for me, full stop. So thank you, White Lotus. Hopefully that lead people to trust me a little bit more. I have the flu and I'm going to bed, but I had to talk about this episode. It was only this could have kept me up an extra half hour tonight, and this was it. We are so deep into it now, and I honestly think the game of White Lotus is two things. Not just to figure out who who's the whodunit, who killed who, but how soon it is takes them, how many episodes in before they use the word narcissist, and that this season would be two. Yep, they use the narcissism word already here in episode 2. So many things happening here. Let's talk about the group of friends. I'll take it from the top to the bottom, but I had to get the whole wise Indian thing in there because that was just too much for me. Let's start at the top with the friends. Such a great example of what happens when you have a narcissistic friend group. When you really listen to their conversations, they're not saying anything to each other. Remember how I say the only way you can engage with a narcissistic person is to keep it really superficial? Well, pretty much all they do is walk around and tell each other, I love you, you're amazing. But they don't really say anything until, yeah, they're putting each other down and triangulating, and they do that a lot. And when they're getting the criticism, and that's the only time the conversations are interesting. Lots of competition, lots of triangulation. They're just acting like narcissistic friends do. It's actually, they're not even that interesting to me. Maybe they'll get more interesting. The other thing we see happen over and over again, because just about everyone on this show right now is narcissistic, is that denial of feelings. Why did you say that? I never said that. Why did you do that? I never did that. You saw that happen in that family. You saw it happen with the kind of vulnerably narcissistic sociopathic guy and the British girlfriend. I never did that. I never said that. Now we know that's not full on gaslighting, but it's in essence, nobody is attuned to anyone else's experience. And that was cut through all of these various relationships. There was one moment though, and let me tell you, this would have been actually the ringer on this episode for me if they didn't get into the whole wise Indian thing. But when the guy, the vulnerably narcissistic, almost seemingly sociopathic, probably gonna murder the husband of the Thai woman kind of feeling guy, well, him, when he goes and meets that said wise Indian therapist woman, he says something that was so fascinating. She was trying to talk him through his history, and she's talking to him about his stress and his identity and all of that. And he says something that was so integral to understanding narcissistic personalities. He said, I never had an identity. I don't need to detach. I'm already nothing. And it's an interesting when he said that, because the character is so contemptuous. He's so dismissive. He's so antagonistic, and he's so empty. And that kind of formal acknowledgement of it in such an articulate way, actually, he's probably doing better. He might actually benefit from therapy. But it is interesting because some of you are probably thinking, well, I kind of feel like that after having been through a narcissistic relationship. I'd never had an identity. I don't need to detach. I'm already nothing. Well, that's the projection of that experience of the narcissistic person onto the other person in a relationship. So not only are the narcissistic people feeling empty, but everyone around them feels that way too. And that guy's story, a really rough backstory, all of that captures that and also gets into that idea of the way people present as vulnerably narcissistic, and that antagonistic can often have a traumatic backstory, which again can foster a lot of that trauma bonded stuff. You kind of feel bad for the guy, but he's also a mean guy. And then he goes on to say, nothing comes from nothing, which I really thought was like, whoever is writing this show has a tremendous insight into how these personalities, his personalities work. And you're talking about this idea of his tank is empty with no gas. And to me, I read that, of course, I read it that way, as this tank being empty with no gas is his tank being empty with no validation, no supply, as it were. There never could be. In essence, he was saying he's always going to be empty, like I've always said. Narcissism being that tank with a hole in it, a hole in the bottom in it at all times. But again, the dropping of the narcissism bomb. It happens about 2/3 of the way into the episode when the friends are talking to each other. And the friend who's drinking too much that I kind of thought she might be sort of narcissistic-y. Well, she drops the narcissism bomb to describe their friend Jacqueline, who's sort of the movie star actress. So I know one thing that a lot of us have been wondering is if the massage therapist, I think her name's Belinda, but the massage therapist is going to notice that Tanya's ex, I'd like to think of as colluding in her murderer husband, if she will notice him. And she did. So whoever was betting on that, you got that. I got my narcissism in episode 2. You got the massage therapist Belinda noticing the ex in this episode. And that's setting things up really differently because I'm sort of it's definitely changing my thoughts. I didn't know if he was just going to show up and not show up again, but then what fun would that be? We know he's obviously either a malignant narcissist or full-on psychopathic. So as far as I'm concerned, she's noticed him. He hasn't noticed her. But the minute he notices her, she's in danger because he remembers her. He made reference to her in season 2. So we know he knows who she is. Now, the other big narcissism piece of this, obviously, is the master of the universe father in that dysfunctional family system. It's interesting to me that his sort of who's seeming less mild and more moderately narcissistic wife, who needs to take anti-anxiety pills to obviously stay in this relationship, and behaved in a very entitled, kind of not very nice way when one of the women from that group of 3 recognized her from some old past party. I'm sure that's a story that's about to emerge. But now the father in that family, again, who we know is a full-on narcissist, figuring out the type yet, probably malignant. We'll have to wait a beat on that one. But he's now really mad because in some such scandal that he's been concerned about has finally blown. And what we also see is that you can see how quickly he's pivoting to, you can really see how sort of dark he goes so quickly. So there's that piece as well. What was fascinating to me was there was a scene where the vulnerable narcissistic guy, who clearly has some designs on the husband of the older Thai woman who sang and gave a beautiful performance, and is going to Bangkok, that there's something that obviously he's got some bone to pick there. That's our mystery to figure out. But when his very young British girlfriend comes into the hotel room with him and approaches him and says, "Hold me, protect me." Such an interesting scene to me because in literally this young woman who keeps engaging with him as though he's a healthy, normal partner, she's literally asking for the very things that a person would ask for in a narcissistic relationship. Attune to me, protect me, which is not going to happen in a relationship. He translates that into have sex with me. So good luck with that. Then one last piece I wanted to throw in there that I had noticed was the guy, and I'm not good with names. You gotta write that one off to my age. But the guy, the Tanya murder husband man, he you can sense that there's an emboldened quality to him, right? He got away with it. And it was really interesting to watch sort of a grifter with a grifter. So the vulnerable narcissistic man with the much younger British girlfriend is now having a conversation with the Tanya murderer ex-husband. And he is sort of trying to figure out what it is you do. And he says, I do this and that, grifty answer. But what it felt like is that Tanya's ex-husband, or what do you call him, widower or whatever, he's emboldened. There's an emboldened quality. Like he feels like he's gotten away with something. Like he moves through the world as though he belongs in it and probably thinks he can keep getting away with stuff. Love that episode, if for no other reason, but for the line of all lines, that it is good to talk about things with a wise Indian. Here's hoping. But then as I leave each of these episodes, which I know many of you are also wondering, who do we think is going to get killed? I was still ready to double down, and I'm going to probably regret this. I'm torn. I think though, oh gosh, I'm torn. All right, you know what? I'm going to stay on my original bet, which is that it's the young Thai woman who has now had the security guard profess his love for her, and she seems a bit lukewarm. I'm wondering how much there's going to be some form of wound or injury, or even she's harmed to harm him. That feels like it's shaping up. That said, the reason I'm struggling with this, because the other place I think this could really go is that Tanya's ex, whose name I cannot remember, that Tanya's widower, whatever the hell his name is, that he kills the massage therapist, and that's who's killed. So I am really torn. I may switch my bets. I know it's lazy and sloppy to offer two. I'm going to stay here it's just a matter of principle on the idea that I think it is the young Thai lady who works at the hotel that is the one who meets her end at the end of this. But I may kick myself, or I might have better ideas, but I'm going to try to hold on to the idea that maybe there is in me, despite the flu, a little bit of a wise Indian in here. So I hope you enjoyed the episode. I have to tell you, I didn't think anything was going to make me sit straight up in bed tonight. This episode did. Thanks.